this lecture on Dwight Eisenhower and his scenes during the Cold War. Sit back and enjoy.
Hey guys, this will be our second video on Dwight Eisenhower and his policies. If you'll recall from the last video, what we said is Eisenhower is basically going to be following the policies of Truman in terms of containment, despite the fact he's talking about doing liberation. He's going to follow containment. We said, however, there's going to be some changes. Big change is going to be a different type of military response. Remember, we have the New Look defense policy, which is going to start the buildup of an air force and nuclear bombs. We also said we had this idea of massive retaliation. If anybody ever got out of line, the United States was going to massively retaliate with nuclear bombs to try to keep people in line. That caused some problems because not every situation requires a nuclear response, and so that led to the use of black ops or a CIA in an attempt to handle small-scale situations that would flare up. And so those will kind of be our big themes of Eisenhower. One thing I don't think I stressed well last time was the prestige of Eisenhower, and the Eisenhower name lets him do things that other presidents can't get away with. In terms of this armistice in Korea, I don't think anybody else can pull this off. No one else can leave Korea and say, yeah, we're totally fine, aside from a five-star general, right? So Eisenhower has some prestige that's going to let him get away with some things that other presidents wouldn't have been able to get away with, because at any point in time, he can say, five-star general, I killed Hitler, I won World War II. And that allows him to pull off some things, and we'll check that out as we go on today. I'm going to try to do about 10 minutes on this. I'd like to talk about Iran and Guatemala. Iran, Guatemala, Vietnam, I'm going to try to get in the next 10 minutes. Just a reminder, today's YouTube video lecture is brought to you by Monster Energy Drinks. Monster Energy Drinks, low on energy? Release the monster inside you. Again, Monster Sunrise is the best flavor of Monster Energy drinks. And if you'd like to make a donation to Mr. Nichols Staying Awake while taking care of kids, you can drop those off at my house. But I'm not going to say what that address is on a public YouTube channel. Let's quick talk about Iran. All right, Iran, we're going to keep this kind of scaled down. If you want to know more, there's a nice Wikipedia page on this. Iran has a democratically elected official, Mohammad Mossadegh. I've heard it pronounced Mohammad Mossadegh. I've heard it pronounced a bunch of different ways. I've always gone with Mohammad Mossadegh. A democratically elected guy in Iran. He starts getting into it with specifically Great Britain. And he gets into it with Great Britain so much that he nationalizes BP oil fields. BP, British Petroleum, right? The little green gas stations you see around town, that's British Petroleum. He nationalizes their oil fields in Iran. Great Britain responds by breaking off relations with him, and they put a massive embargo in Iran, and there's a big to-do over these oil fields. But Great Britain really doesn't have the military might to do anything anymore. They're recovering from World War II because it's 1952, 53. And so they turn to the United States for help with this, and the United States steps in. The problem is, what are you going to do? Go nuke Iran, which has a southern border with the Soviet Union? And the theory that's going on here is Iran nationalizing the oil fields. Nationalization sounds a whole lot like communism. So if they're nationalizing the oil fields, Mohammad Mossadegh, even though he's democratically elected, must be some type of a communist. He's got to go. And so the United States joins Great Britain in opposing this suspected communist, right? This is where the phrase, if it talks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's probably a communist, comes from. I think they're saying, hang on, we'll edit that out in post-production. If it talks like a communist and walks like a communist, it's a communist. And so that's still wrong. We'll just cut this out. Nice going. Hey, shut up. I'm trying to do this on the fly here. So anyways, the United States decides to knock out Mohammad Mossadegh. But we can't do it with a traditional army because we've scaled that down, nor can we invade Iran because Iran has a border with the Soviet Union. So we've got to figure out a way to knock this dude out without traditional military action. Enter the CIA. We use a code name for this, Operation Ajax. I assume it's because we're going to scrub the country clean of communism, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's a cute little rumor that we can spread around. So it's Operation Ajax. Mohammed Mossadegh's government is starting to fail. The economic sanctions put on by Great Britain has caused some arrest in the country, and part of this unrest leads him to he disbands the parliament, and so now there's this argument that this dude's a dictator. It allows the United States to say that he's a dictator. The CIA steps in and starts doing a bunch of false flag missions where they start using intel on the ground to do terrible things. I believe they attack a mosque and they claim that Mohammed Mossadegh attacked the mosque and that he hates Islam. And so they do a bunch of things to cause more unrest in the country. They don't actually assassinate him or do anything like that. They just help with the instability and unrest, which eventually leads to Mohammed Mossadegh's government being toppled. We've worked with the Shah of Iran to come back. The Shah is kind of like the historic king. We help him retake power to become basically a sole dictator of Iran after the Shah is toppled. The Shah is put on trial for treason for disbanding parliament. He spends a couple of years in jail. I want to say 3 or 4 years in jail. He's not killed, but a bunch of people in office that serve for him are killed. Not by the United States, but by the people of Iran. But we've kind of fomented this revolution, and it's not us completely running it, but it's us definitely throwing gas on a fire that's there. So we get rid of this guy, right? And so it's another good example. I don't know if it's a good example of containment so much as, I guess I'll call it containment, right? There's a potential that communism is spreading to a country that's democratic. We step in, we make sure it's not. Whether this dude's really a communist, I doubt it, but that containment policy is there. Notice the different way we're handling it this time. We're using a covert operation with the CIA, right? The difference that in the way that Truman would have handled it. And then we come out with an Eisenhower doctrine. For those of you that are not in my class watching this on YouTube and want to roast me for this, I know this isn't technically chronological, but it's going to make sense for kids in my class. We are going to develop something called the Eisenhower Doctrine. Remember, the Truman Doctrine says we're going to help countries that are facing a minority revolution against a majority. The Eisenhower Doctrine is going to say we won't allow communism in the Middle East because the Middle East is too precious to us because we need that oil. And that comes out under Eisenhower. That won't be until 57 or 58, but it makes sense to put in here. Eisenhower is kind of, schizophrenic's the wrong word, but it's close enough. Eisenhower is going to give a speech after this about how we should be trying to work for peace and how we should try to reduce nuclear armaments and how we should all try to get along. He makes this impassioned plea to let's reduce the number of nuclear weapons that we're putting into the world. And he makes that at the United Nations, and he does that right after Stalin dies, right, reaching out to the Soviet Union. But to me, actions always speak louder than words, right? He says that he's going to attempt to reduce nuclear weapons. However, if you look at what he does throughout his administration, it's nothing but massive growth in terms of nuclear weapons. Give you a second here to think about this, what motivates Eisenhower actions. I'll just assume that you fast forwarded 30 seconds while you thought about that and just give you these answers. I think a couple things, right? I think Eisenhower doesn't want to, I think he's realized that, well, hang on, I got to think about this now because I haven't really thought through what's motivating him. I think on one hand, he's motivated by reducing the federal budget, and that's why we're going to start moving away from an army and start focusing to massive retaliation. The problem is, I think that theory is working bad for him already in his first year, because how do you deal with an Iran situation or a small-scale situation? And I think that's where his policy and his actions are going to start getting pushed to using covert operations. And then the next one is, well, his speech to the United Nations, what's this all about, and trying to create peace. Well, I think he's genuinely afraid of nuclear annihilation and ending the planet, but it's catch-22. If you don't build nuclear weapons, then how do you support your policy of massive retaliation? So Eisenhower kind of has this schizophrenic personality of we need to have peace, but we need to have big guns to have peace. I think we'll wrap up this video here. I'll try to put another one up right away, but that's 10 minutes, and YouTube's only given me 15. So we'll pop another one up in a second. Thanks for paying attention and listening to these lectures that all about the Cold War, and hopefully you're getting something out of them. Thanks.